All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing a week 2 preview and prediction for a big game going down between Mississippi State and Arizona State. Sun Devils 6.5-point favorites, 59.5 is the total. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This game is on ESPN2, as Army and Kansas State will be on ESPN for some reason from Davis Wade Stadium, though in Starkville, considering this a bit of a trap game for the Sun Devils. Looking at the ASU offense, this group's pretty much the exact same from last year, but there is certainly a notable omission, and that's Cam Scadaboo. He's gone. This guy was an elite playmaker last year for this offense. He departs, leaves everyone else here, though, in terms of supporting cast and offensive line. So it's not really that much of a new unit, other than trying to figure out who's going to make plays in the backfield. Kyson Brown stepped up week 1. Relic Brown had, some nice plays as well. He had 50-plus total yards. He was used on special teams. Kanye Udo, the nice transfer from Army, barely played with only a couple of touches. But this is still a very nice backfield that I like. Sam Levitt ended up having 73 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing, including a long one showcasing his wheels. And I certainly wonder what the game plan will be this year, Nick. And this is going to be a great opportunity to see what they're going to do when it comes to running the football. Are they going to try to supplement it with Levitt's legs, maybe call some more screens? Are they going to use all these running backs? I'm very curious to see how it's going to play out. What's your assessment of what the Sun Devil rushing attack might look like in SEC country?
Yeah, it's curious to see what they can do on the ground without Scadaboo. Sam Levitt, he had a pretty solid day, and I think they're going to try and use his legs when they can. He ended up having those 73 yards and the 2 scores, including that pretty long one that he burst out there and looked really good doing so. He looks confident in the pocket. I think he really has good balance from knowing when to run and when to stand in the pocket. So that's good to see in your quarterback overall. And then Kyson Brown looked really good, right? 73 yards from him as well. So both of them had 73 yards in 7 attempts. I think that was really solid. Odoa, we didn't really see a whole lot of him. I wonder if you'll use him more in this situation. On a tough road environment in the SEC, I think you want to use him a little bit more. I think Udoa is a guy that you can definitely get a lot out of. He's a very versatile back from Army. And Relique Brown didn't do a whole bunch, but he did have that touchdown as well. He's more of a red zone back, I think, for this offense going forward. I'm curious to see what the balance looks like running the ball and passing the ball as well. Talk about the passing attack in a second here for Arizona State. But I thought they did a decent job on the ground early on, 9.1 yards per attempt, just over 200 yards rushing, and 3 scores against their bad opponent from the FCS. So I think they'll be pretty solid running the ball here. I don't think Mississippi State's the best front 7 in the world at defending the run. So I expect them to try and use Levitt's legs, trying to find a way to run the ball and get that involved in the offense here. I think they'll have a solid day with a nice rotation of backs, even if they're missing Scadaboo.
Now you look at the past game led by Sam Levitt. This is a guy who come onto the scene last year and had a very successful freshman season. Really good debut as well, 4 total touchdowns, had 257 through the air. Jordan Tyson returns from injury. He was not available the back half of the year, and this offense was still really good. The Big 12 title game, we saw them put on a show, nearly beat Texas without him as well. So it's pretty impressive this offense can ball without him, but obviously his health is incredibly more important now. He got 12 receptions for $141 and 2 touchdowns, and this guy is just a target machine. He was like this last year too. I mean, he had a stretch of 100-yard games there that lasted quite a while. I think it was like a 70 or 80-plus yards in like 7 straight games or something like that. But nonetheless, Tyson is a guy they just are so good at getting open, and he's doing a great job of cashing in with a lot of receptions. He's great when it comes to his explosiveness, great in the short area. Jordan Tyson is just so tough to cover. And I was excited to see some of these new transfers they got in the portal at wide receiver, and nobody did anything. The only other wide receiver who had receptions was Malik McLean. He had 2 of them for 5 yards. Everyone else was tight ends and running backs. Kyson Brown had 6 receptions for 72 yards. Relic Brown, a former wide receiver, ended up having a few out of the backfield. Shimon Mateer at tight end. He's probably their second best pass catcher. Regardless, had a 20-yard reception. At what point does this become concerning, Nick? If it's not broke, don't fix it, because Tyson, he can handle this large workload. At some point, I'd like to see some other receivers step up, especially if one day some of these teams magically are able to cover him.
I think it could become concerning for this team because Jordan Tyson, he was the big offensive target here, but they didn't really throw the ball to anybody else. Tyson, that 141 and the 2 scores, looked really good when being involved in the offense. In general, I thought Levitt looked pretty good. 25 of 39 for a 64% comp rate, 257, 2 scores through the air, and he did have 1 interception in that matchup against Northern Arizona. I thought he looked the part. He looked pretty confident and comfortable under center for this team. But I don't know who else is going to catch passes here. They threw it to the tight end once. He had a 20-yard reception at one point. Kyson Brown had 6 grabs, so he'll probably be involved out of the backfield, but I don't know if that's an entirely reliable pass setup. Malik McLean, he had the 2 small grabs that really didn't do anything, so I don't really know what it's going to look like. The rest of the depth chart has there's pieces on there, but they don't seem to be targeting them early on. I wonder, are we going to see Jalen Moss get some reps here. Noble Johnson. These are two guys they had out of the portal that are really hoping could do more. Derek Eusebio is a guy that's been on the roster for a little bit. Maybe he gets some more targets here, but they didn't really throw to anybody. I think that could certainly cause them some issues in the future, but as long as Tyson keeps balling out, I'll be confident this team will win. But if he starts to slow down a little bit and has some games where he's not putting up top production, it may be a problem for the Sun Devils offense.
Moss and Eusebio had a combined 3 targets. McLean had 4. So, I mean, they were trying to dish it out to a few different guys, I guess, but it was not that hard. They weren't trying that hard, obviously, but Tyson, of course, is incredible. But so far, this is an offense that should have tremendous balance, especially behind a good offensive line. Josh Atkins at left tackle, Max and Ancor at right tackle. He's a tremendous pass blocker. I love Ben Coleman, who was really inconsistent in the opener. This is an offensive line I'm a big fan of. Kyle Scott's also a veteran right guard, and they're going to be going up against what should be a physical defense. Moving to the Mississippi State offense, this is a group that started the season slow in the first half against USM. They turned it up in the second half. Right away you're able to see this passing attack showcase some of his explosiveness. Blake Shapen ended the day with 270 yards passing. Brennan Thompson, I didn't expect him to come in and be the alpha right away at wide receiver, but he made some big plays for him, almost 100 yards receiving there. He was really able to make him pay on a screen as well. Sadoy Troy at tight end, he had a big touchdown, I think it was on the first drive of the season. He ended up with almost 80 yards and 5 receptions. Anthony Evans as well had a bit of a nice day. Jordan Mosley was not used as much as I would have liked. So it's a passing attack that we certainly noted to do well when it came to picking up guys in the portal over the last year or two. And I think they're certainly improving their passing game. We just didn't see a lot of consistency from them, especially in that first half. Blake Shapen, though, Nick, I think this is a guy that's a gamer. I love watching him play. He's not that bad of a quarterback. He can make plays with his legs, though, but he only had 6 attempts for 5 yards. They weren't really trying to get that element of the offense going in week 1. In week 2, I can totally see them trying to just drain clock in this one because the rushing attack, they started to find their groove a little bit, and it should be the, top, play calling when it comes to this offense is running the football. That's kind of what this scheme by Jeff Lebby is built on, is running the ball, and I think Blake Shapen's legs are going to be a big aspect of that. What do you think of Shapen overall, Nick, when it comes to potentially running the ball and also keeping this passing attack, when it comes to upside, pretty explosive?
I think Shapen's a pretty solid quarterback, right? 76% comp rate in that matchup against Southern Miss in week 1. 270 yards passing for him. He had 1 touchdown through the air. He did have an interception in that game. I thought he was really solid, though, right? They spread the wealth here, right? They had a couple different targets here. Thompson had 7 receptions for 92 yards. They hit Traore. He had 5 grabs for 77 yards, plus the touchdowns. They had some targets involving there. Anthony Evans got some targets as well. He had 4 grabs in total. So I think they were able to spread the ball out pretty well. You didn't see him run the ball. I'm curious to see if they're going to try and use his legs in this situation. It would not surprise me if they tried to attack this defensive line for Arizona State with Shapen on the ground, but he looked pretty comfortable as a pocket passer in this matchup, in the week 1 matchup. I'm curious to see what his utility will look like here. I think he's a player that maybe they're a little concerned about his health long term. Overall, 4.48 yards per attempt on the ground for this rushing attack. Also 5.89 yards per play, had about 270 yards total through the air. So I think this is a passing attack that has some potential upside here. I'm curious to see how they face against tougher opposition in this matchup. Can they find a way to have success? And can Shapen have some time? The offensive line gave him some solid time and gave him some ability to get some good looks in that pocket. What will his pocket look like against a better pass rush for Arizona State?
Yeah, especially since these receivers are transfers that didn't really play at their previous destination, and they're now finally getting on the field for a team that's not all that great. So I definitely wonder what they're going to do against what's a pretty darn good secondary. You look at that rushing attack. They ended the day with $188 and 3 scores. They just were not as explosive as I thought they would be. Bothwell had 43 yards, 2 of those scores. Devon Booth had a nice run that helped get him almost to 80. And they were giving these guys touches, combined 26 rushing attempts between the two guys. This is going to be one of the top duos in the country. They're going up against a great run defense in Arizona State, though, Nick. So Shapen, like you alluded to, his health, it's definitely been a problem in his career, but he's going to have to get involved here. It's a nice 3-headed monster with those guys. But I certainly was a little bit disappointed with how much they left on the table in that game against Southern Miss when it came to running the football, because they just weren't able to operate the offense they want. That's to be able to be a run-first offense, use tempo, gash opponents through the middle, and I just didn't see enough of that in week 1.
Yeah, I didn't see enough of that either, right? I think they have 2 really good backs in Devon Booth and Fluff Bothwell, who didn't really do enough despite the 26 touches for them, 79 yards for Booth, plus the score, 43 and 2 scores for Bothwell, but both of them are under 5 yards per attempt against a Southern Miss run defense that I wasn't particularly too high on coming into this season. Overall, 4.48 yards per attempt and 3 scores for them on the ground. Yeah, I think that's a number that you probably want to see a little bit higher if you're a Mississippi State fan. And you got to keep an eye on what this offense can do on the ground. The offensive line, I think, looked a little shaky at times in terms of run blocking. They were pretty good in pass blocking in my assessment. But can they find a way to get some traction on the ground, get ability to get some good yardage on the ground against what is a pretty strong run defense from Arizona State that should eventually have a good day here? And they were able to put some productivity on the ground in terms of stopping Northern Arizona in their week 1 matchup. I'm keeping an eye on that matchup. Can Mississippi State find a way to have success running on the ground? If they struggle to run the ball, it could certainly be a long day for the Bulldogs.
I look at that Arizona State defense, and we start with that run defense because I think they're honestly in elite territory. We saw them last year not give up a single game of 200-plus yards. Started this season on a high note. They ended last year dominating Texas, who had a great rushing attack that smoked Clemson the week earlier. They didn't give up a single rush of over 10 yards in that playoff game. Now they turn around and go up against a offensive line that's kind of a makeshift unit. It's a new unit for Mississippi State, and pretty much all the key components are back for this defensive line for Arizona State. Starts with C.J. Fight on the interior. He's phenomenal. Jacob Rich, Kaika, he's great. Clayton Smith, Prince Dorba, veteran edge rushers as well. Justin Whitley's pretty good. Elijah O'Neal's one of those underrated players there. So it's a nice group. It's got depth. It's got some pass rushing ability. But when it comes to stopping the run, these guys were incredible last year. This is a test that's probably not going to phase them all that much. I don't see a world where they struggle in this game, Nick. I think 150 yards max is kind of what we're looking at for Mississippi State when it comes to running the football. But, the Bulldogs, they deserve the respect. They can at any time with the talent they have hit you with some explosive plays. And with this home crowd, Nick, one explosive play, it puts so much energy into that atmosphere for Mississippi State, and that could really hurt your opportunity to win this game. So they have to be stout on Saturday night.
I think if they have less than 150 yards rushing, Mississippi State, that is, they'll lose this game. I think that's really the recipe for success. You have to have more than $150. I think they want to be competitive in this game. I just don't know if they're going to be able to get that against a run defense that I thought was pretty solid for Arizona State in their week 1 matchup. 3.07 yards per attempt on the ground, the 89 yards total, and the 1 touchdown. I think they were pretty good against this Northern Arizona team. They were able to get pressure, and they were able to look good in that matchup and, kind of limit the opportunity for big plays and limit the opportunity for that rushing attack to really do anything. Clayton Smith was your best guy on that defensive line. 6 tackles for him. He had a tackle for loss. He looked good. Elijah O'Neal, he also had 6 total tackles, and he had a sack as well. He was pretty solid at getting in the backfield. Prince DeBoer was solid for this team as well. 2 total tackles for him, which were both tackles for loss. So yeah, that's pretty good numbers overall. I think they had some other productivity that was pretty good that I saw out of some of their guys. So they have good rotation. Ramar Williams, the guy that they got on the field a little bit, he was noticeable in run defense. So I like what they can do here. I like what this defensive line looks like. I thought they passed the test pretty well early on. And then they can really turn into an elite unit come the end of the season. I think they project well, and they project well in this match, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's still a complex scheme that can hurt you with tempo. I'm excited to see how these linebackers do. Jordan Crook was really good in a rotational role last year. He's now going to be full-time. He shined in the season opener. Keyshawn Elliott alongside him. He's a player who's certainly had some inconsistencies that can be frustrating, but he is still a great alpha. He's a very good producer as well. So I like the linebackers, and I think they'll do well in this game. The secondary, though, I think there's only one real weak spot, and that's in the slot. They had a handful of different guys line up in that spot. Montana Warren, Kendrick Breedlove, they both played. They weren't all that great. Miles Rouser, he can sometimes play in the slot, but he's mainly a box safety, and he's just tremendous when it comes to defending the run. He can be an inconsistent tackler at times, though. Xavier Alford, he's a phenomenal center fielder back there at free safety. He's great in coverage. And, of course, we talked about this cornerback duo in the offseason, Keith Abney, Javon Robinson. These guys play a ton of snaps. They're both quite sound. This matchup isn't the toughest. Brandon Thompson, of his speed, though, is definitely going to challenge you on plenty of reps, especially if Mississippi State does have some success going on the ground. They try to hit you with a play action, and you're not expecting it. So Brandon Thompson's going to be a tough matchup for these corners, Nick, but it's something that I've seen these guys handle just well. They've played some of the top receivers in CFB last year, and this was a good secondary, and I think they earned their stripes as one of the nation's best.
This was a solid secondary that had a decent showing in week 1. Nothing too special in my opinion. They ended up giving 242 yards, so maybe it's a little bit high if you're an Arizona State fan. I think they have some good pieces in the linebacking core as well. Jordan Crook was really good in that matchup. 7 total tackles for him plus a sack. He looked like a good leader. I think Montana Warren, he had 2 pass breakups, 4 total tackles, and a tackle for loss for him. So I thought he was pretty impressive early on. I like what he could do. Miles Rouser, he was playing really well in that versatile role that he plays out there. 4 total tackles and a tackle for loss for him. Keith Abney, he was pretty pretty good as well. He had a sack, so they're able to get him some pressure. 4 total tackles for him in the game. Overall, I think this is a good secondary for Arizona State here. They're facing a tough task where I think this, passing attack from Mississippi State showed me a lot more life than I expected out of them. So this may be a pretty tough task in a hostile environment, but I do like what they have. A phenomenal secondary should limit the big plays. I would expect Mississippi State to have some success passing the ball short and the intermediate throws. I think they'll have some success in that regard, but ultimately I think this Arizona State secondary will have a pretty strong day.
Now I move to the Mississippi State defense. Of course, this is a group that was one of the worst in college football last year. It's still a work in progress. They had a pretty strong debut against Southern Miss, especially when it came to defending the run, especially a quarterback run. Braylon Braxton is a phenomenal runner, great athlete at quarterback. He was just not able to make many plays with his legs. So I think that's certainly encouraging for Mississippi State to get the kind of effort week one in what was potentially a trap game for them. Will Whitson, this guy was phenomenal. I mean, he had a lot of pressures. He was able to get a couple of sacks in there as well. He was phenomenal coming from his defensive end spot. Nobody else really stood out too much. There was really a by-committee approach. Jere Bledsoe, I'm counting on him to step up on the interior. Calvin Dinkins really struggled against the run, though, in his debut. Deontay Anderson, Austin Shepard, a couple of those guys on the D-line. It's not that talented of a group. It's a little bit deeper than I think we potentially originally expected, but Will Whitson, we thought he was one of the top transfers, and he instantly put that to, being proven. I thought he had a phenomenal debut. In the middle, though, the linebackers, Nick Mitchell and Jalen Smith, some more veterans for this group. I thought they had very solid debuts, and those guys are pretty good, especially when it comes to defending the run. What do you make of this front seven for Mississippi State, Nick? Well, I guess it's the front six in this 3-3-5. I just don't think this defensive line's all that skilled. Whitson, though, is a phenomenal player, and he can certainly change this game with just a couple of his own plays.
Yeah, Whitson was really good in that matchup down in Hattiesburg in week 1. 4 total tackles for him. He had 3 TFLs and a sack there. So I think he was a really good guy that was really versatile. They got a lot out of him. They held, Southern Miss to 100 yards on the ground, 2.91 yards per attempt. Didn't give a touchdown on the ground. So I thought it was really solid. The run defense looked a lot better for Mississippi State than I think we expected. This was a very bad team last year against the run, a very bad team in general defensively. So I think this was a defense that was looking positively, trending towards the positive direction here. But outside of Whitson, I didn't really see a ton of the defensive line. Jalen Smith at linebacker was pretty good for this team. 7 total tackles for him. I thought he looked okay. Silva and Nick Mitchell, they each had 5 tackles. They looked okay. LaKendrick James had 4 as well. In general, I think this is a unit that's still a work in progress here, and they're facing a tough test where even if you don't have that real number 1 back for Arizona State, they have Sam Leavitt, who's a complete wild card at quarterback running the ball, and then I also think they have some solid backs that could potentially get involved in the rotation. It may be a tough day for this Mississippi State defense on the ground. I like the ability here for the QB run to really step up and be good. I know the QB run had a bad day on Saturday, but I think this is a tougher quarterback test here, and I think this is an opportunity for Leavitt to have a really strong day against a defensive line that's still a work in progress.
Look at the secondary. They had a pretty strong performance. Despite 26 completions allowed, it was for only 199 yards. They gave up 3 passes of plays of 20-plus yards. So they gave up a few explosive plays, but not a whole lot. Diego Brumfield was great at corner. Kelly Jones as well. These guys were standouts in week 1. So I definitely expect them to try and continue that momentum. The slot saw numerous different guys get involved, so I'm not really sure who's going to be in that position. The way they scheme things up, you can certainly, see a lot of targets from Jordan Tyson in the slot, more than you're probably accustomed to seeing. Jerron Manning is one of the leaders at free safety. He also had a great game when it comes to run defense, but it wasn't as ideal in coverage. The secondary, it's also kind of a work in progress. Really don't know what we're going to get from them. I do know in terms of talent, though, I don't know if there's anyone that's going to be able to compete against Jordan Tyson, especially with how crafty he is. So it'll be interesting to see the game plan and how they attack that wide receiver 1. But one thing I do know is these corners did play pretty good in week 1.
Jordan Tyson is always going to be a tough matchup regardless of who your secondary is, so I think it's going to be tough. But I think this defense played pretty well in week 1, particularly the cornerbacks looked pretty good here. That Southern Miss team had only just under 200 yards receiving. They had 2 touchdowns, and they did force a pick. Mississippi State, that is, I think it was Braylon Lanier that got the pick. Yeah, interception there, 6 total tackles for him at safety. Isaac Smith, he had 7 total tackles as well. He looked pretty versatile at that safety position. I think he was good. Hunter Washington, same deal, 4 total tackles for him. I think there was some productivity out of him, and you can get something going for him early on. This is a secondary that is a work in progress again. So they're facing a tough task here. I think Jordan Tyson will obviously be a guy you have to keep an eye on, but I like some of the aggressiveness. I like some of the ball playing ability there. Malik Silver also had a pass breakup in that game. Tanner Duke Johnson had a pass breakup at secondary. Kelly Jones had 2, and cornerback, he had 2 tackles as well. So I think they're a little bit aggressive unit here. They may be able to try and force a turnover and put themselves in good position, get that crowd energy behind them. I think the secondary is a decent unit, but I do think this is a tough matchup. Tyson's just impossible to cover. I think he'll really have a solid day here.
Yeah, Isaac Smith, he led the team with 120 plus tackles last year. He had a pretty strong week one as well. And of course, the aforementioned Jerron Manning, he was a great playmaker last year, Old Dominion. So I think they have some playmakers in the back end. We'll see how they can do in this game. Moving to the tail of the tape, the team comparisons. For Arizona State, I'm pretty sure they're going to get an edge everywhere across the board. Not many concessions to be made here. I think running back, I think Arizona State still probably might have the edge in that one. I'm going to give the respect to Mississippi State on that one, just to give them a little bit of a nod, because it is a strong duo, even though Arizona State's just as deep. What do you think about these here, Nick? Not much of a discussion.
Yeah, not much of a discussion. I would give running back to Arizona State as well. I do feel bad to pick on Mississippi State because I do think they're an SEC team at the end of the day, even if they are the worst team in the conference. But this is just a better Arizona State roster. I don't think Mississippi State would go out and win the Big 12 if you plugged them into that conference, whereas Arizona State won the conference last year and returned pretty much that entire roster other than bringing back Cam Scatteraboo. I think they got the better roster leaps and bounds, and they really have a lot of advantages here.
The final thoughts on the prediction keys to the game. I think for Arizona State, you got to showcase poise on the road. This is a tough environment. Limit the explosive plays in the run game. And if you do that, I mean, you're pretty much in for an easy victory, I'd say, for Mississippi State. Feed off the crowd's energy with the cowbells. I mean, it's so annoying to play there. It would really, if I'm an offensive player, I would just dread going to Mississippi State. And don't let one guy beat you, and that's Jordan Tyson. Make the whole offense work. That's where I think Arizona State's a little bit more beatable, especially with Scatteraboo not being there. I think Arizona State, this is a trap game for them. I love this team this year. This is going to be, potential for them where the season could get away from them early on in the year, because they have some tough conference matchups coming up just a couple of weeks. So if they lose this game, Nick, they could lose the whole season very quickly. So Arizona State, I think they're good on paper. Top to bottom, they're so much better than Mississippi State with this offensive scheme, with this crowd at night. They're going to be up for this contest, and I think it's certainly a dangerous trap game. I'm going to pick them to cover, though. 34-23. Nick's going to go with an even wider score. I think Mississippi State, you're going to start to see them click at some point, right? I think Jeff Lebby's a really good coach, especially with this run scheme. But I think Arizona State, they're just so good when it comes to defending their run. Mississippi State, it's going to take a real valiant effort for them to impress. I'm definitely worried for the Sun Devils, Nick. I hope this is not a trap, or it doesn't end up being a trap game and they lose. I think they're so good, and I would hate to have an early season trip to SEC country derail any momentum you might have. So I'm worried for them. I'm going to pick them to win by double figures, as you do too.
This is a very intriguing game on the slate going down in Stark Vegas, Starkville, Starkganistan, whatever you want to call it. I have a lot of friends that went to Mississippi State. I spent a lot of time there when I was in college. Shout out Paxton, football, James, Josh, Jack, and Reed. Those are my guys that went to that school. They're excited for this game, and it certainly is an intriguing environment. It's not the greatest stadium in the world, Davis Wade Stadium, but those cowbells are a unique factor, especially for a team that really has never experienced anything like that, and a lot of players that have never played in an environment similar to what you're going to get with the cowbells. Those are tough to deal with on any given Saturday, so that certainly adds a wrinkle to this. If this team gets going early on, they have some success on the first drive, they force a turnover early in the first quarter, they're running the ball, that will be a tough environment to overcome, and that will be very loud and very difficult to deal with down there in Starkville. So keep an eye on that. Look to get an early start if you're Arizona State, kind of nullify that crowd, get a jump on this early, and put yourself in a good position here. Whereas Mississippi State, same story for them, right? If they can get it early on the clock there and be comfortable in the first quarter, that could really go a long way for this team. I see Arizona State winning this game by 18 is what I end up having there. I think they win this game by 2 touchdowns comfortably. I think they just have the better roster across the board. I trust Sam Levitt a lot. I think he showed me in his week 1 matchup that he's maturing a little bit as a passer and looking a little bit more comfortable in that situation. He's also very talented as a runner. I think Mississippi State will get better throughout the season. I think they showed me a lot in week 1. I think they were really impressive in some regards there. Did not look lifeless on the road in Hattiesburg. But ultimately, I'm going with Arizona State here. I think this team is just the better team on paper. I think this is an opportunity for them to really go out and get a nice win on the road in SEC country, even if it is the worst team in the conference. That still means something ultimately for this team. I like them to get the win here. I like them to have a strong day. Expect Sam Levitt to put up a pretty good showing. Jordan Tyson as well. I think they'll attack through the air early and often and have a successful day doing so.
For today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.